Hey guys, Jeff here with Naturally Caffeinated. Today, we're going to be working on this 2017 Beta Cross Trainer, specifically the linkage and the linkage bearings. So this is my personal bike. It's got about 2,400 miles and a little over 250 hours on it. I bought this bike from a friend of mine, and I don't believe he's done the maintenance on the linkage bearings, and I know I haven't. So it's time to dig into this. This has got a lot of miles on it and seen a lot of dirt and mud and water. So today we're going to go through the procedure on removing the linkage, going through, checking out the bearings, making sure they're okay to repack with grease, or pulling the bearings out and replacing them. So this procedure can be a little tricky, especially if the bearings are rusted. They can be challenging in getting those parts out. So we'll go through that today, and hopefully you'll learn something and you'll learn from my mistakes. Okay, so let's be clear on what we're talking about here today. On the back of the Beta, this is your rear shock. This is the swing arm. Down below is what they call the linkage. This linkage is comprised of two different components. One is the lever, the other is the connecting rod. Those two pieces combined have four different bearings. And so this is what we're going to be pulling off. Getting those bearings pulled out, we'll get them inspected. And again, just trying to make sure that everything's in good, proper function, because we want the longevity of this bike because we love it, right? Okay, so the bottom of the shock meets up with the linkage here. This is a 13 millimeter bolt. This is a 13 millimeter, and this is a 13 millimeter. This does not have a nut on the other side. These two do have them on the other side, and those are 17 millimeters. So we'll break those loose and we'll start pulling this apart. All right, I finally got the parts out. This is the lever, this is the connecting rod. The lever actually has a bolt that is unique. It's flat on one side. And that's because it only goes in and out one way. So as you see from my time lapse, it took me a little bit at the end to get this bolt out because of this flat surface here. So this bolt is greased up. And it looks like it's kind of nasty, so we're going to be cleaning that up for sure. Okay, and you've got a bearing in here and a bearing in here. This guy has three sets of bearings. One there, one here, and one here. And what I like to do is keep all the nuts and bolts together so that I don't get them mixed up. And in some cases, some are shorter than the other, and just want to make sure that we keep track of everything. So what we need to do is pull off these spacers here and then press out the bearings. Okay, this is a mess. At the beginning of the video, I said that this was a fairly simple procedure. What I meant was it's a fairly simple procedure to getting these parts off of the bike. Getting to this point isn't so easy. So just some quick tips. To get the bearings out of here, you're going to need to use a vice grip, a socket with an extension, and then sockets, one for the outer diameter. And then as you flip it over, you'll need the other socket to press out. So just use your vice grip, your socket, extension, and other extension to push these out. Now, this one's fairly easy to push out. You may have to apply a little bit of heat here on the outer surfaces and then give it a quick tap with a hammer. Or in my case, I just use some PB Blast, and when I started cranking down on the vise, they came out. Now this one, on this dog bone, inside there, this diameter is larger than this internal part. On some dirt bikes, like the Yamaha, I believe, or the CR250, I can't remember which one it was, you can actually press the bearing through all the way through. This one will slide down and push the other one out. And in this case, you need a hidden bearing puller. So I've got to go either to a shop and have someone press this out for me, or just run over and see if the local auto parts store will rent out the tool for this. Otherwise, that's what was inside. It's very disgusting. And the previous owner and myself did not maintain these bearings appropriately. Obviously, there's a lot of rust and a lot going on here. But I did want to quickly note that the All Balls kit right here for the Beta Cross Trainer 2017, the lower bearing is different in the kit than the original style, which is okay. But just wanted you to note that the new bearing is this style, whereas the old style is right here. It's a needle bearing. But don't worry, this one will work just fine. It comes with the end caps and then the seals as well. So just a quick note, I'm going to get this over to the shop and see if I can't get these pressed out, and then I'll be back. Okay, so I ended up not taking this part to a machine shop to have them pull the bearings for me. I ended up at Harbor Freight, and I got a blind bearing puller and just applying some heat to both sides of the dog bone here, and then using the slap hammer and the blind bearing puller, and thankfully I successfully got both bearings out of the dog bone. Okay, I'm having an issue getting the bearings back into this dog bone. So what I did was I stuck this in the oven at 350 for 30 minutes. I stuck the bearings in the freezer. I'm gonna try to get these to press in as quickly as possible before they cool down and before these warm up. The idea is this is expanded, these are contracted, and hopefully they go together quickly. Again, trying to do this without burning myself. And by the way, this vise is not the most sturdy, and it worried me trying to put these in. There we go. Finally, success. Let's keep working this. And the goal here is to keep this thing socket centered on the... I'm using a silicone, my wife's silicone oven mitt, which I hope I don't get in trouble for it. All right, almost there. All right. That one feels like it's bottomed out. So the next issue I have is I got this bearing pressed in, and I got the seals in, and so I can't heat this whole unit without melting the rubber. And I didn't think of that beforehand, so what I should have done was left the seals out. If I try to pull them out now, I may damage them, which I don't want to do. So note to yourself, if you're going to do this with heat, and you want to heat this whole unit up and then cool down the bearings, then I suggest you don't put the seals in. So learn from my mistakes. All right, I finally got the parts back together. So let me explain a couple things here. I've made some mistakes throughout this process, and I just want to share them with you so that you don't do the same thing. This can be done, and it doesn't have to be that difficult. The challenge is getting the bearings out and getting them back in. And so heat is your best friend. I suggest, if you're going to take the bearings out and then put them back in, heating these elements up. So, and what I mean by that is stick them in the oven on an aluminum pan with some aluminum foil. Set the oven to 350 degrees and then just leave it in there for 30 minutes or so before you get ready to pull the bearings out. Now, of course, you're going to have to pull these dust covers off. You're going to pull the spacers out because you don't want those melting. That goes for both parts. Once you get these things heated up, you can bring them out to your garage and you can use a socket, several sockets, one for the smaller diameter side, and then, when you're pressing them out, and then one for the other side so that it kind of goes like this through the vise. And you'll press the bearing through with this one, it'll capture into the larger diameter socket. Okay, and then putting them back in, same thing. Heat these things up to 350 degrees for about 30 minutes. And then put your bearings in the freezer for the same amount of time, about 30 minutes. And then get your vise, get your sockets and your tools, and they will go in a lot smoother. Now, I spent a lot of time trying to get these things out and then trying to get them back in. And most of it was because I didn't heat them up. Once I did a little research and found that you can expand the metal with heat and then contract the bearings themselves with cold, things went a lot smoother. So I did make one mistake on this bearing here. This is the lower shock bearing. I actually was pressing this in and it went in at an angle and it actually dug a ridge inside here. So I filed that down, got it all nice and smooth inside there, and then I was able to press it in and it went right in place. It was beautiful. So I've greased these things up tremendously. I've got the seals in, the dust caps on, they're full of grease and they're ready to go back in the bike. So I'm so glad that's over, but I'm also glad I learned a lot though. These things need to be maintained. I suggest every 50 hours or so you get down there, you pull these dust covers off and you check for rust and wear, and then repack them with grease and keep them in really good shape. Okay, that's going to wrap up this video. I'm just putting the linkage back together here. And just as a side note, the torque specifications for the single bolt that goes through the bottom bearing is 70 foot-pounds. And then the two nuts on the other two bolts are set for 90 foot-pounds. I really appreciate you sticking around and watching the whole video. And if you have any questions or comments, please leave those in the comment section and then I'll reply as soon as I can. Thanks again.